Happy Epiphany, everyone. 12th night was last Wednesday, the end of the 12 days of Christmas, and January 6th was Epiphany, which we celebrate today. It's, Mardi Gras season. Epiphany season lasts from now through Ash Wednesday, until Ash Wednesday, Fat Tuesday, Pancake Supper the night before, where will be the beginning of Lent. But now we are in the season of Epiphany. I remember moving to Houston from very secular Washington, D.C. in 2013, and I just noticed so much more sort of active Christians here, and people were just more comfortable with talking about their faith. And I remember being in a grocery store in Houston, and the baking section, they had like king cakes, and there was a sign on that table in the bakery, and it said Epiphany. And I thought, I have never seen that word outside of church in my entire life. But then I come to the Gulf Coast, and we just have the words Epiphany in the bakery or the grocery store. And so I was like, wow, I'm in a different place now. But Epiphany is more than cakes and parties and Mardi Gras. Our collect that Father Desmond read for us tells us the reason for this season that we're in. O God, by the leading of a star, you manifested your only Son to the peoples of the earth. The star over the birthplace of Jesus in Bethlehem was the manifestation, the opening, the revealing, the epiphany of Jesus, not just to the Jewish people, but to the Gentiles. Right? The three wise men who came from afar came from outside of Israel, came from the east, of non-Jewish people, Gentiles. And so it's a celebration of that beginning of the gospel going to all peoples. The Apostle Paul wrote, when you read this, you can perceive my insight into the mystery of Christ, which was not made known to the sons of men in other generations, as it has been now revealed. Again, epiphany, manifestation, being revealed. Revealed to his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit. This mystery is that the Gentiles are fellow heirs, members of the same body and partakers of the promise in Jesus Christ. We celebrate that the gospel is revealed for all peoples, all nations, all races, all tribes, all tongues. And that is why the church engages in evangelism, shares the good news with others. That's why it's a focus of our church. We support families, those who engage in evangelism, one of which is the Fox family serving in Southeast Asia. They serve and minister to other missionaries in Southeast Asia and people we support, helping to pass this message on. But how is the message passed on? How do we evangelize? Do we evangelize via strength and glory, or through cross and weakness? I was in Florida with my family after the Christmas services, and we did a side trip to Miami just with my wife and kids, and we walked up, we did Miami Beach and many different areas in Miami and the Everglades, and we decided to go up and down the strip at Miami Beach on New Year's Eve. Great family activity. But it was in the daytime, so it wasn't too crazy yet. And I went by the spot where there were all these people with, weights, essentially an outdoor weight room by the beach. Very stereotypical. Men and women in bathing suits, bench pressing, flexing for their audience in the crowd. Lots of beach volleyball games with young, strong men and women galore. The flex and the strength of youth. And it reminded me of this. What is the image of the church? Are we to be people of strength and the glory and power of God, or of the cross? And unfortunately, throughout history and even today, the church often tries to lead with strength and glory and all good things instead of weakness, instead of the cross, instead of the way that Jesus led. In the Epiphany story, we have the three wise men showing us this manifestation of God. They are to come to give gifts to Jesus. But Herod wants to use them to get rid of this new king, right? This powerful king, of course, is threatened by Jesus and wants to destroy him. And so he tries to get this information from the wise men. They know better and are able to find Jesus, give their gifts, kneel and bend the knee to this true king, the true wise men, Jesus, and are able to outwit Herod via the dream and go back home. So you have this image of Herod and his palace, this image of might and strength connected with Pilate, connected with Caesar, the glory and power, and then the weakness of Jesus. Herod in his strength, and Jesus in the feeding box crib of the manger. One connected with power, and the other with weakness and ultimate defeat. We, like the wise men, are called to kneel, to be servants, not lords, kneeling down, not the king, lying and scheming, showing strength to stay in power, who never intended to bend the knee to anyone. But often, unfortunately, it's something that the church culture tries to strive for. There's a famous account on Instagram called Preacher Sneakers, and it's a man who likes to follow different sort of megachurch pastors who have these sneakers that he realizes are actually worth a lot of money. And he points out these pastors who are preaching to people, but that the sneakers they wear are actually worth $2,000, or the jacket they wear is actually worth thousands of dollars. And that they're trying to look cool, to get other people to join the church, to say, like, being a Christian is cool, that the ends justify the means. But it gets out of hand. It's not about being cool. It's not about being strong. Which is why I wear this is not cool, by the way, This is like a 1970s Jedi outfit, No, not trying to impress anyone with my robes. But there was a most popular religious podcast of 2021 was called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Mars Hill was a popular church plant in Seattle in the early 2000s. Mars Hill comes from the place that Paul went to in Athens, Areopagus, right, where the people gathered together to discuss philosophy. And it was an incredibly fast-growing church plant led by a pastor, Mark Driscoll. And the podcast is about its rise in the church that eventually imploded under the ego and the narcissism of their pastor. And it goes through, why did this happen? And one of the themes of the podcast is, why is the church looking for, why are people going to a church of the narcissistic, ego-driven pastor? Why do people want this? And why, in this iteration of this church in Seattle, the image of the church was strength, was that being a Christian was about being a tough guy, being strong. The head pastor used his pulpit and his position to bully and intimidate in the guise of strength and leadership and being a strong, strong Christian, being a strong, take charge husband, being a tough man in charge of your family. And he would mock weakness, vulnerability, tears. The message that came across in the church was that Christianity was about power and strength and glory, not vulnerability, not mercy, not weakness. He actually said in one of his sermons, I could never worship a God I could beat up. I could never worship a God I beat up. It's hard to square that message with the crucified Jesus, to square that message with a toddler in his mother's arms in the manger, with Jesus who turned the other cheek, who told Peter, put away the sword, who told us to pray for our enemies, who was willingly captured. Now, Jesus had strength. He had authority, yes. Wise, yes. Comfortable in his own skin, for sure. But not a tough guy. Not strength as our world portrays it. But he gave up that power for the sake of salvation. Mockingbird Ministries had an article by somebody who worked in that church. And he writes, it was becoming clear to me that the culture of the church was over-identifying with the possibility of power and influence, which was in contradiction to a cross-shaped outlook on life in the church. Mockingbird notes how our common assumptions around power get mingled with our ideas of spiritual success. Our common assumptions about power, worldly power, get mingled with the spiritual aspirations and success. He said that's what Mars Hill adopted. Only growth, triumph, conquest were allowed. Growth by any means. But this glory story, there's no room for failure. There's no room to lose, to die, and no room for Jesus. This road to glory and strength might look flashy and exciting, but it ultimately leads to the doctor's office, to getting medication, to losing. You might eventually get run over by the bus, but fortunately, the greatest of physicians knows how to raise the dead. The Apostle Paul knew this too. He says, "Of this gospel I have become a servant, according to the gift of God's grace that was given me by the working of his power." God is the one who is powerful. We are his servants, and we serve each other. This is not a religion of power. I know a few other popular religions which emphasize power, and some denominations or pastors which emphasize power in relationships, power in your marriage. But that's not the way of the cross. The message is not that being a Christian is tough or even cool. Either way, Jesus was not cool. Being cool means you're indifferent, distant, right? Cold. Toughness isn't sympathetic. We have a Lord who is present, who is close, who cared, who healed, who hung out with outcasts, with undesirables, untouchables, people with reputations, people with pasts, real people. So what are we communicating with our faith, with our evangelism? Strength and glory, that if you follow this, you'll live an incredible life, your best life? Or is it a place for burnout, a place for recovery, a place for grace? The Lord is here. The church is the place for his word, his power, his grace. Grace even for Christians. David Zoll wrote, "I am grateful that God uses broken things, even broken churches, in the lives of broken people, and that Jesus is in the business of redeeming traumatic experiences, even religious ones, especially religious ones." Life is full of hiccups, crashes and burning, unintended consequences. We need a faith that has the paramedics at the front door, ready with a gurney for you. Because that's the kind of faith you want when you're having trouble, when you lose your job, when you don't get into that school. Not a tough God, but an understanding one who took the pain, our unmet expectations, our misguided hopes, to give us what we actually need. A church full of people who may not be living our best lives, but we're happy. May not be glorious, but healed, at peace. Peace for a God who can bring us there. Amen.